Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. We've been talking about Supreme Court cases, and right now there's a big one when it comes to housing, more specifically unhoused people, criminalizing sleeping on the street and in public spaces. Connecticut has seen sweeps of some of these encampments, activists calling attention to the question, where do they go now? Joining us this morning is someone who's taken that personally, providing people a place to live and amplifying the voices of the unhoused. So with me now, after a night sleeping out on the green, raising awareness and hosting community conversation, Mark Colville, a local activist, founder of Amistad Catholic Worker community and a part of Unhoused activist community team UACT. Mark, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So you have, quite an interesting story of how you got involved in unhoused activism and specifically encampments in New Haven. Can you give us a little bit of background there of how your work started and what you've been facing after the tent city sweep more than a year ago now?
Sure, thanks. You mentioned the Amistad Catholic Worker. This is our house of hospitality that we started here in 1994. So we're in actually our 30th year now. So as part of this, one of the founding members who has lived here all that time, I've had maybe a front row seat in terms of not only kind of seeing the experience of people on the street, but also trying to be engaged in service delivery to folks and to try to build community among people on the street. So that's the work we've been engaged in. Now, as we got deeper and deeper into it and into relationships here in the neighborhood and such, we started to realize that, that it was time to, maybe examine some of the water that we're swimming in when it comes to trying to be people of help and assistance to others, And so along the way, and I'm going back now about 10 years, the United Nations actually did a study of U.S. Municipalities with regard to how we treat the most vulnerable among us, particularly the unhoused. Now, and they in this study they were holding up the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which was codified, of course, in 1948. And so what we realized from reading this report, and actually it was quite a scathing report about local municipal laws across this country that have become rampant, that criminalize homelessness. And they called for an immediate change to these laws, okay? So we took that to heart, here in our little neighborhood here in New Haven. We felt that, it was time for us to change, that we've been trying to, again, provide community and hospitality and, home and safety and neighborhood for people here all these years. And, so we're kind of swimming in this water where many of our extending ourselves in this way involves, not recognizing people's basic human rights. Now, if people have a right to take refuge on public land, when the state does not provide them with adequate, affordable housing, now that's what the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights says. Now, it became very clear to me as an organizer that. And this is an important distinction to make about human. Now, I understand that. In fact, I've been told by people here at Yale University that when you start talking about human rights, that people's eyes glaze over. Well, I guess what? Poor people have human rights. Okay, and a basic understanding about law. And I know that you mentioned the Supreme Court case that's before the country right now. Right. Very, very significant case, right? It's very important that people understand the context in which the Supreme Court is hearing this case, okay? Just very briefly, okay? Law does not grant people human rights, nor does law take human rights away, okay? The whole concept of human rights is that human beings have them by virtue of being human, okay? When a government attempts consistently deny those human rights, internationally that becomes known as a failed state. And when, like the situation that we have now in the United States and in New Haven specifically, when we criminalize people for taking refuge on public land, when we refuse to provide them with housing, then we are standing outside of compliance with the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Okay, and so what I'm trying to educate my own neighbors about, and specifically those who are unhoused, what I'm trying to help people understand, and what we're trying to understand together, is that human rights are not, they're not granted by law or denied by law. Human rights are only given when they're taken. Okay, you have to assert them. Okay, so what we have in New Haven now, and as you mentioned, we had an action last night. It was a very poignant experience. Pouring rain. The very first night after they closed all of the warming centers, which people had been taking refuge in all winter. Now apparently it's not cold enough for people to freeze to death, so that option gets completely taken away. So last night we went over to the green right in front of City Hall, under the mayor's window, basically, with the intent to serve a big meal for folks and to pitch tents, and as a way of getting the point across that we are going to assert this human right here in New Haven.
And Mark,
we're not
to jump in here real quick,
Yeah.
Sorry not to cut you off, but you're mentioning that that gathering and bringing people together, and I wanted to ask you about that. We know Mayor Elicker came with some police to your overnight activism and said, that you could all talk about some solutions. You were explaining what you all were doing there. Tell me, what do you feel is missing right now, if anything, or what could be improved in the services that do exist in New Haven, before we talk a little bit more about, what could be done more?
Well, for one thing, the reason that there's not affordable housing is because housing has become such a capitalist venture at this point, right? Even to the point where, we're trying to assert, a project in terms of tiny homes and things like that, which hundreds now of cities across the country have approved these kinds of plans.
Right.
So there needs to be an alternative to, obviously, apartments in the city of New Haven are not affordable to a very, very growing cross-section of people, okay? We need to get in front of that problem, okay? We don't get in front of it by arresting people for simply asserting their human right to take refuge. The only legal alternative that this city provides under this mayor, the only legally sanctioned alternative for somebody who can't afford an apartment tonight, is to self-institutionalize in a homeless shelter, quote unquote. Now, the shelter system in most cities, including New Haven, is basically run according to a criminal justice model. You get patted down as soon as you walk in. You get separated from loved ones, people of not your gender. You get separated from your property. You don't have agency, freedom. You don't have the right to visit your loved ones. You don't have pets. If you have a job and it doesn't fit into, the schedule of the shelter, you can't have that either. Now, this is the only legal alternative for unhoused people in New Haven. That has to change immediately, okay? So last night, we went down there, and apparently we found out that that the mayor apparently had called the police chief a few hours previously, having heard what our plan was, to have this kind of a festival and setting up tents symbolically and staying overnight. That when he found out about it, he called the police chief and said that we need a major police presence on the green today, okay? And so the police came and they literally threatened, and again, you had half the people at this gathering had just spent their last night in a warming center, okay? And here they were invited to a place where people were actually coming together to try to help them, carve out a better existence in the city this year, okay? And this is what they were met with by this mayor. Okay, the threat of arrest if anybody set up a tent. Okay, there's something wrong here. The mayor is not. He's acting disingenuously. Okay, and he's telling a lot of falsehoods about the reality of homelessness, and he's getting away with it. Now we're trying to counter that by simply trying to amplify the voices of people experiencing homelessness in our community.
Right. And Mark, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but we really appreciate you coming on and spreading awareness about this. We know you'll continue with this activism, and we'll definitely be checking in with you. Thank you so much again for being here.
Okay, thanks a lot.
That does it for us here now on The Real Story. But if you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the free Fox 61 News app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61 or streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great morning.